Hello and welcome to Book Lust. I'm Nancy Pearl. My guest today is someone that I've been looking forward to talking to for a long time, Susan Wiggs, and we're going to be talking about her brand new book, Wayward Girls. Susan, thank you so much for joining me on the show.
Nancy, thank you. This is a really special moment for me because I am a Book Lust fan from way back. It's been I've listened to many episodes, so thank you so much for having me.
Well, I'm glad we could make it work because I just thought your book, Wayward Girls, is so fascinating. And I want you to give the elevator pitch for the book, but expand on it and tell us how you decided to write it.
Okay, the elevator pitch is six girls in 1968 in Buffalo, New York, find themselves incarcerated in a Catholic run, brutal reform school that is based on true events. And it's their journey from being, teenagers in this awful system to finding justice, crawling through, all of the ins and outs and ultimately finding justice in the end. And it's not a typical book that I would write, but I came to writing it through usually I'm the beach book writer, the feel good, emotional hit of, romance. And so this one was a bit of a turn for me, and it came about kind of organically out of my life. I grew up in Western New York until I was 10 years old. And then after 10 years old, we moved overseas, and I never went back. And then in 2020, I went back with my brother, he had pancreatic cancer. So we all know where that was going, but he was doing okay. And so we kind of made this nostalgia visit back to this hometown. And we had a moment that I bet a lot of people have experienced where we stepped into our childhood Catholic church, and it was a big Gothic one, a big stone pile in this little town in Western New York. And there was some kind of quality of the air and the echoes and the sounds and the smells in there that brought back a flood of memories. And it was just one of those moments where there are things that it reminds you there are things buried inside everybody that are just sort of waiting their turn, or maybe you'll never think of them again. But I remember I turned to John, he's 2 years older than me, and I said, did you used to be an altar boy here? And he said, yeah, one time I had one chance, before we moved, and he got to be the thurifer. And that's the kid who swings the incense ball in front of the processional at High Mass. And he said, I only got to do it once because I caught my sleeve on fire with the coals. I know. And so for some reason that stuck with me. And I started thinking about the role of the Catholic Church in lives in the 60s. And for some reason, it just led me to start researching. And my research took me to this giant institution in Buffalo. It's still there. It's at 485 Best Street, if you ever want to look on Google Maps or something. And now it's not a reform school for girls, but it was called the Good Shepherd. And it existed from like the 1880s till the 1970s. And that was where they sent girls who failed out of the social system or foster care system, or girls who were orphans, or girls who were pregnant, or girls who needed to be reformed for some reason. And it was run by incredibly strict, harsh nuns. And so I was just fascinated by this because I was a little bit aware of the Irish Magdalene laundries. We had been hearing about those. They were coming out in the news. I wasn't aware there were so many in the States, including one in Seattle, a real bad one in Albany, one in Philadelphia. But the one in Buffalo was so interesting to me because the building is still there. And then I connected with some survivors. And they're all women a bit older than me. They're in their 70s and 80s. And a couple of them were incredibly forthcoming with their experience. and it might have been just a year or a few years of their lives that they were there, but it marked them for life, and they had stories to tell. And I thought, well, how can I put this in a novel and convince my beach book publisher that it would be a good idea to publish this kind of different sort of thing. And I have to give my publisher, my editor credit. They really embraced the idea. They thought it sounded like an important story, and it had a bookend, because another thing that happened was in the early 2020s, I think, all adoption records, pre-adoption records, were unsealed by the state of New York. And at the end, there was also, they call it a look back law, where they take away the statute of limitations, and people who were victims even decades ago had a chance to seek justice for a certain time period. And so it was kind of bookended by that, and things just started falling into place. And it was one of those books that took a long time to write, because it spans a big time span, and there's a lot of, I wanted to get it right, because I felt an obligation to these women who survived this to tell the story in the best way possible. And so I took my time. I took extra time writing the book, and when it was published, I've never had this happen before in a publication sequence. I started hearing from people who would say things like, "That happened to me," or "I know somebody." And so that was new to me, because, the beach books happen to everybody. We all go to the beach and fall in love and, have turmoil and get married or whatever. But this was different. There was some quality. So thank you for letting this be the book that we're going to talk about.
Wayward Girls, it does have like the hallmarks of your other books, right? I mean, I think the ending, you've been, as you are to your characters, you're so generous with your characters, and you as the writer care about them and want to do the best for them.
Yeah.
I mean, I've always felt that, don't you think?
Absolutely.
I think that's...
And I know that you've had the one novel out, and are we waiting for another one?
Just George and Lizzie.
Yeah, George and Lizzie. No, but these are the people that you live with when you're writing. Yes. You're going to live with them for a year or 2 years or however long it takes, and so you want to build them into these three-dimensional characters that feel real to you. And you're right, I have a great deal of affection. And the other thing that I was real conscious of as I was writing Wayward Girls is I didn't want them all to be the same girl. I wanted each major character to represent somebody who realistically would have been at this institution in 1968. And so we have, the kind of Marin, the irrepressible teenager with a strict Irish mom and the awful stepdad. And then we've got the gal who becomes a librarian. And we have, and I did hear from it was secondhand, but somebody said, well, people would bring their girls there if they were going to go like work overseas for a time or something, and they needed their kid to stay somewhere. They didn't realize, sometimes the parents didn't realize what really went on in these schools, because they called them schools, but they didn't give them an education. They made them do laundry. And at the one in Buffalo, they made them make communion hosts, the little round crackers. So not much of an education there, but my girls in Wayward Girls, the other thing that was inspired by my research is a librarian helped me a lot with my research. She's the librarian of the Buffalo History Museum, and she sent me a snippet of an article. Remember articles that used to be reproduced on, what do you call those big viewers they're kind of like an amber color thing. I can't even remember. But she sent me
Yeah.
one, and it showed that the library bookmobile would go to this place once a month. And
Oh,
that inspired the whole sequence of the escape.
right.
So, yeah,
I
so
know.
sometimes the deeper you research, the better your book gets.
Right. I mean, I thought, like, as hard as this book was to write, because it was so different and you were trying to be so true to the experience of the young women who were there, I'll tell you, the fact that they escaped in the bookmobile was, I just thought, oh my gosh, this is terrific.
That was
That
my
they did
movie
that.
moment. I'm
Yeah.
desperate for some movie producer to pick it up and say, okay, this is the movie trailer right here.
Right, right. And the other thing, in addition to the book itself and the story of the girls and that, it was the little things that you put in that that I just loved. And one of them was the reference very close to the beginning. You refer to Beverly Cleary's book 15, which is how Marin discovers that's her view of romance. All she knows is, from 15, which is one of my all-time favorite novels. I just, and the fact that you did that, it just made me want to pick up Wayward Girls and hug it. And the other thing that I thought you must have had great fun with is all the music from 1968. That was like, I just went to Spotify and like downloaded. Oh yeah, I forgot about that. I got to put that on my listening, to listen to.
That was one of
Oh,
the most pleasurable parts of the research is what was on the top of the charts at that time and what was planned, what would
right.
they have listened to. And I tried to make Marin's mother very judgmental about Pink Floyd, and
Yes.
the
Right.
and I loved the fact that the movie The Graduate came out that year,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
little bits that I would find and be able to include in the book. That was pretty good.
Yeah, well, as one reader of it, I have to say, I just loved encountering those little bits that you put in. I have a question about what you think about the motivation of the nuns, the sisters who were running the Good Shepherd School. Do you think that any of them believed in felt that they were helping the girls?
Oh, 100%.
Or
Yes, they
you think they
absolutely.
all,
They were raised in blind obedience and not to question authority. And they were told, we are saving these girls' souls. These are girls in trouble, and here's how we fix them. And it was really uncomfortable. I always like to think I would be the rebellious one who would stand up and
right,
say, well, we can't be doing this. But it's so institutionalized and so ingrained. And when I think back to myself, at that age, I was very impressionable, and I did want to get along, and I wanted to be the good girl. And I like to think I wouldn't be as brutal as some of these nuns were, but a lot of people perpetuate what they were raised in, and that's why
mm-hmm.
Sister Rotrude. Don't you love the name Rotrude? That was from my
I do,
research too.
yes.
That was why I didn't justify what she did, but it made it understandable that she was, came through the same system and said, well, look at me, I'm, a good woman now. And so it was that was a hard part, because you always want them to wake up one morning and say, wait a minute, we can't be doing this.
Right,
And then the other one, the one who was sort of more on the fence and was actually the age of the girl, she was so young, Sister
right.
Bernadette, named after Song of Bernadette, one of the sweetest movies ever. But anyway, Bernadette was pulled out of such horrific, grinding poverty that she had the element of gratitude. They
Right,
saved me, and I owe them,
right.
my obedience. And so there was that.
Yeah, I can see how hard, because as I read it, they were fully involved in what they were doing, and they did have each had their own reasons for believing that this was the right thing to be doing. But it was painful to see two women treating other women, young women, like they did. That must have been hard to write.
It was. It was hard in the way that, to me, Handmaid's Tale is hard. We
Yes.
even have now a character type called the Aunt Lydia. Oh, don't be an Aunt Lydia. That means don't enable this really abusive system. And yet it went on for years and years. There are some that persisted in Ireland into, I think the last one closed in 1996. And
Yeah.
so we're well rid of them, but they were really, really persistent. And one of the most powerful things that I read in the course of my research was a book called The Girl in the Tunnel by Maureen Sullivan. And she was featured, I think she was featured with Oprah and Claire Keegan, who wrote Small Things Like Me, which we've all read and had our hearts broken about that. But Maureen's memoir, she had one of those crystal clear memories of her childhood, going from institute to institute in Ireland, and she really made it understandable why the victims would tolerate this, and why it was seen as a helpful thing. But I'm happy, the way we treat our young women. I hope that we're getting better. I think we're getting better, but there's still room for improvement there.
So moving on from Wayward Girls, do you think, what are you working on now?
I'm starting to research a book that takes place in 1975. So there was something nostalgic about going back to my childhood and revisiting that. And so this is has to do with the wrap up of the Vietnam War and things that were happening in the 70s. Because that's the other thing, is when you're writing a book, the only thing more fun than writing the book is the next book, sort of pulling at you and saying, wait, pick me. So I'm just starting to research life in the 1970s. And I really liked, one of the things that was really creatively satisfying for me is to write a book that had such a broad scope. It spanned a life from 15 to 70 something. And so I really loved that journey. So I'm kind of interested in that too. But it will be a Susan Wiggs book. There will be like affectionate, good characters that find their way to the end by hook or by crook. But yep, I'm just in the research stages. I had I know you're a bicyclist, right? Aren't you?
Well,
Yeah, you and
I've
your hubby.
switched to walking because I felt like bicycling was a little too dangerous.
You know
these
what?
days.
That is a good choice. I was bicycling last year, and I flipped over an unmarked speed bump here on Bainbridge Island and pretty much broke every bone in my head. And was like, airlift to Harborview and, the whole drama. And so it's been, that's been a journey. I've never had an injury that serious before. And it's not one that you just heal from and walk away. It's happening in stages. Right. I'm getting better, but it's slowed me down, and it's made me have a new rule. One new rule is have as much fun as you can, as quick as you can. Because you never know when you're going to be upside down on the trail. And number two is, just take your time. Take your time. Read some more books.
Right. And what do you, when you're doing the research, what do you turn to? What do you look at? I know you go to the library.
Yep, first stop library. And then, of course, internet is always the rabbit hole, and it can lead you down some really unproductive places, but it's also incredibly varied. Like one of the treasure troves that I found trying to research Wayward Girls was a message board for women who had survived these reform schools, these Magdalene Laundries in the States. That's how I found out there were so many.
Wow. Gosh. because I thought that was, because I think doing as a librarian, I feel like, doing research is one of the great time wasters in a way, but it's not really a waste. You can just go down all these different rabbit holes.
Well, it's time intensive, I would say.
Yeah,
And
right.
and it's probably my favorite thing. And if I get stuck when I'm writing a book, which does happen a lot, it's because I haven't done enough research. And so I have to go and revive, a trail has gone cold or something like that. And so that's definitely, because if you think about it, if you're writing a book about somebody who's not you, you've got to research that whole life. If she's a librarian, if she's a farmer, if she's a broadcast professional or something like that. So there's plenty of research to be done, and there's inspiration all around.
Do you have an outline when you write?
I do. And it's not super detailed, but I definitely use it like a loose roadmap. I hope that I leave enough flexibility to change things up as I encounter them, because the characters take on a life of their own, and you can't always predict how they're going to act. So I'm very I try to be easy on myself, if something doesn't add up or something like that. But yeah, I do. And I share that with my editor, who's a very creative person at William Morrow Books. It's an imprint of HarperCollins. And she is happy to weigh in on things. I mean, she doesn't declare, you must do this, you must do that. But she is really good at asking the good questions. Well, what if we go here with it? What if, that sort of thing. And so I appreciate that partnership too.
Yeah, my editor for my novel George and Lizzie at Touchstone, which is an imprint of Simon and Schuster, when I finished and sent the whole thing into her, she sent me a letter with like 10 questions, and in answering those questions, got at everything that she thought that the book needed, and they were terrific questions. And so, I think that kind of collaboration that you have with your editor is so great.
A good editor is such a gift, isn't it?
Yeah. Yes. So last question.
Yes.
What are you reading these days?
You know what I'm reading? I was shocked to learn that this was a children's book, and I bet you've read it. I'm reading The Last Cuentista, and it won the Newbery Award. I have no idea why it's a kid's book. She's a survivor of a horrible thing that happens to Earth and goes with her family to outer space. It's amazing. It's amazing. Yeah, and I picked it up. It's one of those few things. I'd never heard of the book or the writer, but it was on display at the library, and so I picked it up. And I am a sucker for really good cover art. Like, I love my paperback cover art for Wayward Girls. Yes. It's so bright and shiny. The hardcover looks very serious, but the paperback book club edition looks more like a party. And so this one, The Last Cuentista by, let me look up her name, because I didn't recognize who the author is. It is Donna Barba, I'm going to say this wrong, Higuera, Higuera, and it's a magnificent book. You would love it. It's a Nancy book for sure.
Yep. I'm going to go put it on hold right now. Susan Wiggs, thank you so much for being on the show today. It's just been a delight to talk to another fan of libraries, and I'm just in awe of your career and your books. I just think we're so lucky to have you here. So
well, this is a high point, being on Nancy's show, because I'm, like I say, I'm such a fan. So thank you very much for having me. This was delightful.
Thank you.